Hi guys, so here we are ready to start our lesson on the Last Supper, and I'm going to show you first of all what you will need for this lesson today. So Paul's going to help me with that. So here is Paul. He is ready for the lesson today, and he has several things prepared. First, there's the Bible. So if you have a physical Bible, you can use that, or another device that has a Bible on it so that you can follow along with the verses. Also, there is a notes page on Moodle called Last Supper Notes. So this is a printed out version. You can either do that or you can split screen it with the video if you know how to do that and type at the same time. Or if you don't have access to those things, you can just get a piece of paper and you can write. But I know it's easier to fill in blanks than to just start from scratch. So that's what that looks like. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to share the Last Supper together here. So if you want to participate physically with that, you can get some bread and some juice. I'm just using what I had available. So just ask your parents, or you can use even things like crackers or other things. And then you can join with us when we get to that part of the lesson. So maybe pause the video and get yourself all of the supplies so that you're ready. Okay, so let's get started. We are going to be talking about the Last Supper today, which is a really significant event in Jesus' life just before he was crucified. So we're going to talk about the Last Supper, what it means, what it is comparing to from the Old Testament, and also we're going to look at what did Jesus actually talk about with his disciples during that time. So first, let's start with the background so that we understand what is happening during this meal. It's not just an ordinary meal, it's the Passover meal that they are sharing together. And so in order to understand what that means, we're going to go back and just think about how that started in the Old Testament. So as you can see on the notes, we have the Passover meal listed there. And several things that we're going to talk about that are included in that celebration. And the Passover meal started, this whole festival started back in Exodus. So if you, I'm going to put those verses up here. Exodus 12 is where this started. We're not going to read Exodus 12 because it's a very long chapter, but I just want to explain for you how that started. So thinking back to Exodus, this was a time when the Israelites were in Egypt and they were slaves to the Egyptians, and it was a really difficult time in their history. So this is the time when Moses was chosen by God and sent to Pharaoh to tell him to let the people go. And then he said no, of course, and then God sent all of the plagues. And during that time, the Israelites were expecting to be freed and rescued. And the last plague that happened was when the angel of death was going to come in and kill all of the firstborn sons. And God told the Israelites to take a lamb and sacrifice it and put the blood on the doorposts of their house so that the angel of death would pass by and not kill their firstborn. And so the name Passover comes from the idea that the angel of death passed over their house and did not kill them. So then they started the tradition of this festival of Passover, which was to remember that event. And so the meaning of why it was celebrated was to remember when they were rescued from slavery. Okay, and so when they had this Passover meal, they would eat several things. I did not include all of the things that were part of that meal on there. If you are interested, you can look up later on the internet what are all of the different parts, because there's a lot more than just the lamb and the bread and the wine. But we're going to focus on the lamb, the bread, and the wine. So the lamb was the meat, and obviously that was the animal that was sacrificed so that they could put the blood on the door. So the lamb represented the sacrifice. The lamb was sacrificed in order to save the people. And then we have the bread. And the bread at that time was unleavened, because leaven is the yeast which makes the bread to rise. And they didn't have time to wait for bread to rise when they were expecting to escape from Egypt. So they made unleavened bread, which basically, if you think about tortillas or pitas, they're flat. It's flat bread. And that was the type of bread that they ate. But also the other thing that they did at the time was they cleaned out their houses and removed everything. And after this time, leaven in the Jewish mindset was a representation of the things that they didn't want to have in their lives, such as sin. And so it came to represent sin and things that they wanted to remove from their lives. So an unleavened bread would be a bread that was showing that there was no sin. So I'm just going to put no sin here. And then finally we have the wine. And the wine was what they would drink, but because wine has a typically, unless it's white, but usually red wine has a reddish color and kind of looks like blood, and so the wine would remind them of the blood of the animal that was sacrificed for them, that they put on their door, which then saved them from their children being killed. So that's what the background of all of this is. And so when Jesus came to this Last Supper with his disciples, this is the meal that they're celebrating, and the disciples would have had in their mind these things that they're remembering of what God did for the people, and that's the purpose of having the Passover meal. And then Jesus, when he had this meal with them, he took these ideas and he shifted them and changed them and added new meaning that tells them about what they are going to see happening very soon. And so there's a new meaning from Jesus. And what we're going to do at this point is we're going to read these verses, and as we read them, we are going to take the bread and the juice and use that to physically remind us of the baby, and then we're going to talk about the meaning that Jesus is giving for that. So if you have your bread and your juice, you can put it out. Here it is. And I'm going to read these verses, and as we read, then we're going to take the elements together. So this is Matthew 26 through 29. Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples. And said, "Take, eat. This is my body." And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." So what does that mean? We ate bread, we drank juice. I mean, does that have any significance? What does it mean? So think about what the Passover meal means and how does that compare to this? So first, what are we remembering? Well, Jesus is about to die. And so when Jesus dies, he is offering himself as a sacrifice to save us. So just like the Israelites were being rescued from slavery, we are being rescued. We are being saved from slavery. But what is our slavery to? We are slaves to sin. Right? Sin is keeping us captive. And the parts of the meal are also shown here. Now, the lamb represents sacrifice, and in this new meaning, when Jesus dies, who is the sacrifice? Jesus. Jesus himself becomes the sacrifice. And as he is telling them about the bread and the cup, he tells them what that looks like, right? He says, when he gives them the bread, he says, "This is my body." And as we see, and we think about Jesus and the idea of no sin, Jesus was perfect, right? He had no sin. And then with the wine representing the blood, now we have the wine representing Jesus' blood. So we see these parallels and how Jesus is telling the disciples about this new meaning of the Passover meal. And I want you to think about, what are the disciples thinking at this point? When he says, "This is my body, this is my blood." Think about, what would their reaction have been? Now, the other thing that I'm going to look at is Jesus' words to the disciples. And so I'm going to just read through these verses. And this time I'm not going to write all of the answers, but I'll just briefly, we'll talk through it and you can fill in the answers. So first of all, in Matthew 26, so the same chapter, but this is before he talks about the bread and the wine. "And as they were eating, he said, 'Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me.' And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, 'Is it I, Lord?' He answered, 'He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born.' Judas, who would betray him, answered, 'Is it I, Rabbi?' He said to him, 'You have said so.'" So Jesus at this point knows that Judas is going to betray him. right? So on this first one, betrayal by Judas. Judas, one of his disciples, is going to betray him, turn him in to the chief priests and the Pharisees. Now, the other disciples probably at this point are thinking, okay, well, it's not me, so that's good. But later, Jesus says not everybody's off the hook. So if we look at Matthew 31 through 34, Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter answered him, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, "Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all the disciples said the same. So all these disciples are saying, I'm not going to deny you. I'm not going to deny you. And Jesus says, but you will, because he knows. So denial. Everybody's going to deny him. So Jesus knows all those things are going to happen. But he still loves them and he talks to them with love. So if you will go ahead to John, in John we get more of a description of the things that Jesus says to the disciples. And in John 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, there are all of these things that Jesus says to the disciples, the last words that he has for them, even knowing that they're going to betray him and deny him and all of that. He still loves them, he cares about them, and he wants them to think about what's going to happen when he leaves. So I've just highlighted some specific parts of this. And so what I want you to do is you're going to, on your own, read through these statements that Jesus is saying to the disciples, and look at the verses that are given there and fill those in and think about what is Jesus telling them. And in here we see that he is going to be preparing things for them. He's showing love to them. God's going to give them peace and comfort. But it's not going to be easy because they're also going to be hated and persecuted. So in spite of everything that they have done, it's going to be hard, but they need to know that Jesus is still with them, even though he's not present in the flesh. So what I want you to do is read through those verses and just fill in those blanks. That will give you more of a sense of what Jesus is saying to the disciples. And I'm going to pause this for a minute while I switch over to explaining to you what your assignment is. So this is a famous painting of the Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci, which you may probably have seen. So I just wanted to show you that because it's relevant to our topic. This is his interpretation of what the Last Supper might have looked like. And I show that to you because I'm going to ask you to do one of your assignments that's related to that. So I'm going to show you what your assignments are for this. So the first one is Last Supper picture. So for this one, I just want you to think of a creative way to show the Last Supper, or even what the Last Supper meaning was, something related to this lesson in a photo. So this could include you taking the bread and the wine, or you can use props, anything that you have around your house. So I'm looking for creativity, as well as, how you've understood the story. And then you take a photo and you upload that photo in that Last Supper picture assignment. So that's it. So here's Paul's photo of the Last Supper with all of his turtle friends. And that's due on Monday. So that's the first thing you need to do. And then the second thing is a dialogue. So what you're going to do for that one is choose 2 to 3 of the disciples that were in there at the Last Supper to have a conversation about it after it happened. So you're going to write what they would have said to each other in reaction to the meal they just had with Jesus and everything that Jesus said to them. And the more things you can refer to from the lesson in your dialogue, the better, because that shows your understanding of what you learned. And you're going to put that in dialogue form. So for example, Peter says, "That was kind of a strange Passover meal, don't you think?" John says, "Yeah, what's up with Jesus?" And then they're going to continue talking through what they experienced. You need to have at least 200 words in your dialogue. Feel free to do more if you are enjoying the creativity of that and want to do more than 200 words. That's totally fine. That's just giving you a minimum limit. And then you're going to submit that on the Last Supper dialogue, and that's also due on Monday by 9 a.m. So those are your 2 assignments for this lesson. The notes that you took are just for you to help you to look at those and think, what should I put in the dialogue and also in the photo. So that is all for this lesson. So I hope that you enjoyed that and that you have a great day.